Alright guys, so I just want to quickly go over what JavaScript is and why you should use it. So JavaScript is essentially the Java programming language, as the name implies. I'm kidding. JavaScript has nothing to do with Java other than they share a similar name and they're both programming languages. So JavaScript is one of the core technologies of the web alongside HTML, which is a markup language and is used to structure web page content, as well as CSS, which is used to style that content. So JavaScript is what brings life to the front end or the user interface of a website or a web app. And it allows us to make web pages dynamic. Not only that, but it can also be used on the server side to do things like interact with databases and work with the file system. And this is with the help of the Node.js runtime. So JavaScript is a high-level interpreted programming language used to create interactive and dynamic website experiences. And when I say interpreted, what I mean is that it's executed line by line rather than being compiled into machine code first. So the code is executed on the fly, making it a scripting language, hence the name JavaScript. So as far as what JavaScript is used for, I wouldn't be able to fit everything on this page. So I'm going to go over just the general things that JavaScript is used for. So first off, it's used to manipulate the DOM, or the document object model. And I'll be going over the DOM in depth, but you can basically think of it as a tree-like structure of nodes, and everything on the page is a node, including every HTML tag, every attribute, every piece of text, and so on. So JavaScript provides methods for dynamically changing that structure, or changing the content or the styles of the elements in the DOM. For example, you can use JavaScript to add, remove, or change text of a heading, or the content of a div, or the styles of an element, such as its color, font, and size. So this is an important aspect of JavaScript, as it allows developers to create dynamic and interactive web pages that can respond to user actions. Now, those user actions are called events, and JavaScript gives us a way to handle events. So we can respond to things like mouse clicks or drags or hovers, keyboard events, form submissions, and just about anything you can think of that you can do in the browser window. And again, this allows us to create very dynamic interfaces and things like modals or drop downs, collapsible content, and so on. So making asynchronous requests is one of the most powerful uses of JavaScript, and it's used to interact with back-end servers, whether it's your own server that you created or a public API such as the GitHub or YouTube API. So we can make HTTP requests right from our code to fetch data or submit data, and this happens all behind the scenes without having to refresh the page. And this is often used in what are called single-page applications, or SPAs, to dynamically load and update content without having to reload the entire page. So as far as animations and effects, there's many different ways that we can create these using JavaScript. We can use CSS transitions and animations with JavaScript. There's the request animation frame method. There's different libraries like animate.css and GSAP. So these methods allow developers to create a wide range of animations, such as fading, moving elements along a path, scaling, rotating, and so on. Now, data manipulation, which is the process of modifying or transforming data, can be done with JavaScript because it's a full-featured language with data structures like arrays, and this allows us to sort, filter, and aggregate data. So there's all kinds of powerful array methods that we can use, such as map, filter, reduce, and we're going to get into all of these later on. So JavaScript can also be used to store data on the client or in the browser using things like local storage, session storage, and cookies. We can also create single-page applications, or SPAs, and these are applications that load a single HTML page and dynamically update the content without having to reload the entire page. And this provides a really seamless and responsive user experience. So no page reloading. We can create different routes and so on. And usually you would use a front-end framework for building SPAs. So you'd use something like React or Vue or Angular, but you can also create them with vanilla JavaScript. Now, everything that I've said up until this point is all client-side or front-end JavaScript, and that's where it is used the most, I would say. But you can also use it on the server side with the Node.js runtime, as well as Dino. So in addition to consuming APIs from the front end, we can also create APIs that interact with databases on the back end. And there's a ton of frameworks that you can use to help you with this, including Express, which is extremely popular. And we'll actually be creating a back-end API with Express later on. So the last thing I want to go over are some reasons why you should learn JavaScript. So one is popularity. JavaScript is one of the most widely used programming languages, with millions of developers using it to build websites, web applications, browser-based games, server-side APIs, and more. So it makes it a very valuable skill to have, and it opens up many job opportunities and allows for collaboration with other developers. So it's also very versatile. It's used, like I said, on both on the front end and back end of web development, making it a full stack language. This versatility allows developers to build complete web applications using only JavaScript. Not only that, but there's technologies like React Native, which allow you to build complex mobile applications, and technologies like Electron, which allow you to even create desktop applications. Some of the most popular desktop apps are actually built on JavaScript and Electron, including VS Code, which is the text editor that we'll be using, as well as Postman, which is the HTTP client that we'll be using. So I would say that JavaScript is relatively easy, relative being the key term. So if you compare it to other languages, especially more low-level compiled languages like C and C++, it's much easier to get into. And I think anyone who has a passion for coding can learn JavaScript. And you don't have to be some genius. You don't have to be great at math or anything like that. You just have to have some drive and the willingness to learn and put the effort in. So JavaScript also has a very, very large and active community, which provides a wealth of resources, support, tutorials, and tools for learning and improving your skills. From websites like Stack Overflow to social media, JavaScript just has a huge reach. And when it comes to tools, like actual development tools, there's so much open source software. So you have NPM, which is the Node Package Manager, with I think it's like 1.3 million packages that you can just download, install, and use. So there's no shortage of resources or tools when it comes to JavaScript. All right, guys, so in this video, I want to go over the tools we'll be using as well as our environment, which is going to be very simple. We're writing vanilla front-end JavaScript, so essentially all you need is a text editor and a browser. But I do want to show you some of the extensions that I'll be using and so on. So as far as a text editor, you can use whatever you want. You probably already have a preference. I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code. That's what I recommend. It's very easy to use. It's intuitive. It has great extensions, and it's very popular. I would say the most popular for web development, especially front-end web development. And then there's some extensions I'll be using as well. So I would suggest using it, but you don't have to. If you use Sublime Text or Atom or something else, you can still follow along just fine. So the next thing I'd say to install is Git, if you don't have that already. And Git is version control. So basically we can create repositories with our code, and we can also push to third-party services like GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket. So this is not a Git course, but I will show you just the basics, and we will need to push to a service so that we can host some of our applications, some of our projects, because I do want to do a couple simple deployments. All right, and you can install Git many different ways. If you're on Mac, you can use Homebrew. You can also go to git-scm.com and you can download and install it as well. And then I'd also say install Node.js just to have it on your system. Node.js is it's a JavaScript runtime, so it essentially allows you to run JavaScript on your machine or on a server rather than just in the browser. So you can actually use Node.js as your back-end technology. Now, this, of course, is not a Node.js course, but there are some things that I'd like to talk about, especially with NPM, which is the Node Package Manager, and that comes with Node.js. So I would suggest installing that. And you can install either the long-term support or the most recent, the current version. It really doesn't matter for this course. So what I want to do now is just go into VS Code and just show you the extensions that I'm using. Now I have a ton installed, but there's really only two that I would highly recommend that you use with this course. So one is called Live Server. So if we scroll down here, let's see right here, Live Server. So we're writing front-end JavaScript, so we don't really need any kind of server. You could have an HTML file right on your desktop and have a JavaScript file linked to it, or just create the script tag in the HTML file and just open it, run it in a browser, and it works. However, Live Server gives you like a mini dev server that you can run your files with, and it'll auto reload in the browser whenever you make any changes. And that includes making changes in the JavaScript, the HTML, the CSS. If you change any of that code, it auto reloads, so you don't have to keep reloading the browser yourself. So I would definitely recommend using this. That's what I'll be using throughout the course. And then the other thing that I would suggest is Prettier, which is a code formatter. It just keeps your code nice and clean. In fact, I'm going to bring over a file real quick. And you guys, of course, don't have to do this, but I'm just going to open this up. It's a file from the course. And I'm going to show you my settings in a minute, but basically you'll see if I tab a line way over here and then I go and I save, it'll put it right back. Okay, so it keeps your code nice and clean. And then you can also set like the spacing. You can set if you want to use semicolons or not, because in JavaScript semicolons actually are not, they're not mandatory. So you can set those to on or off. As you can see, I have them set to on. So if I miss a semicolon and I save, it adds it automatically. And you can also set it the other way around, where if you have a semicolon and you save, it gets rid of it. And then the other thing that I want to show you are quotes. So you can see this string is wrapped in single quotes. I prefer to use single quotes, so I have it set so that if I have double quotes in here and then I save, it automatically gets set to single quotes. All right, now where you can configure this stuff once you install Prettier is if you go to the settings, so right here, settings, and then just search for Prettier. And then you'll find all these options here, but the ones I want to show you are right here. So semi, you can see I have this checked, so it's going to add semicolons if I forget. If I uncheck it, it'll do the opposite. And then down here, I have single quote checked, which by default, I believe this is not checked, but I prefer single quotes, so I do have it selected. And then here, my tab width, I believe the default is 4, but I have mine set to 2, which makes it a little more compact and neater in my opinion. All right, so those are the settings. Now to make sure that your code formats when you save, just search for format in the settings, and right here, format on save, just make sure that that's checked. All right, so we can close that up, close that. But that's it as far as the tools that I'm using and our environment. So let's move on to the next video. Okay, so most of the code that we write is going to be within a JavaScript sandbox, which is just a bunch of files and folders that are going to pertain to each section of the course. But before we do that, I just want to show you the very basics of just creating an HTML and a JavaScript file and running the JavaScript in the browser, etc. And for those of you that aren't pure beginners, just kind of bear with me, because I do want this course to be for everybody, even if they're just starting out with JavaScript. So you can skip some of these videos if you want, or just watch them as a refresher. So I'm just going to create a folder. So go ahead and create a folder wherever you want. I'm going to create it on my desktop, and I'm just going to call it, I'll call it my-website. And I'm going to delete this after, so it doesn't matter. Now you want to open the folder with your text editor, and there's multiple ways to do that. You can open the text editor and you can open the folder from there, or you can usually on Windows, you can usually right click, and if you're using VS Code, you'll see an option to open with code. So you can go ahead and do that. If you're using Sublime Text, I think you also have a context item. If you're on a Mac, what you can do is drag the folder down to the VS Code icon or whatever you're using, and it will open it up, and you can see on the side here is our My Website folder. So from here, I'm going to create a new file. Just click this icon, and let's say index.html. So now we have an HTML file, and with VS Code, we have a tool called Emmet, which is really great for writing quick HTML and CSS. So for instance, I could do H1 enter, gives me an H1 tag. If I want to add a class, I could say like my class, so dot my class enter or tab. And then if I wanted an ID, I could do, my ID enter or tab. And let's say I wanted like 5 H1s, I could do times 5. There's all types of stuff you can do. So I do have a YouTube video on Emmet if you're interested. But another thing Emmet allows us to do is just create a kind of a boilerplate for our HTML. So I'm just going to hit exclamation, enter, and you can see it gives us our head, body tags, etc. And again, if I know a lot of you guys already know this, most of you probably do, but just bear with me. So if I just hit tab a couple times, I can go to the title and just change it to, let's say, my website. And then in the body, for now, I'm just going to put an H1 and then hello world and save that. Okay, now since this is an HTML file, I can just open it. Like I can just click on it, make sure it opens with a browser, and we'll be able to see the hello world. So you can just develop like this if you want for this course. Like I'm just going to make this smaller. So if we change something, like let's say we put an exclamation here and I save, obviously since I just opened it on my file system, not on any kind of server, I go over here and I have to reload. Now I don't want to have to do that for everything, so that's where live server comes in. So what we can do, as long as you have it installed, just search for live server, so right here, and get that installed. And then you'll see this go live button down here. You could click that, or you could right click and just say open with live server. And what it'll do is open up another tab, and you can see in the URL bar, this is our local host. This is 127.0.0.1. That's called our loopback address, and it runs on port 5500 by default. Now, if I were to change something, like let's say get rid of this exclamation and save, you'll see it auto updates or auto reloads in the browser, so I don't have to keep reloading. And that is with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now, I expect that you guys know HTML. You should know at least the basics of CSS, so I'm not going to really get into that. To start to write JavaScript, there's a couple ways we can do it. One way is not really recommended, but I'm going to show you it anyway, and that is to just write it directly in the HTML. So to do that, what you would do is go down right above the ending body tag and create a script tag, which is an HTML tag. And then anything we write in here is gonna run as our JavaScript. So for instance, we could do alert, which is just it's a function that's on the window object, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. And we can pass in here, let's put a string, so we need our quotes. And again, I'm going to talk about data types and all that very soon, but I'm just going to do a hello and save. And you'll see that that's going to automatically run because we are using live server. So since the file changed, the website reloaded, and now we're seeing this alert of hello. All right, now typically you're not going to do this. You're not going to write your JavaScript directly in your HTML. It's just bad practice. You want to have your JavaScript separate. Okay, this is called inline JavaScript. Just like with your CSS, you normally wouldn't write your CSS in your HTML. You'd create a separate file. So let's create a new file, and you can call it whatever. I like to use script.js for just general JavaScript files. And this will show us our alert again because the page reloaded. And then in here, let's write something else. We'll do an alert, and let's say hello from the JS file. Now, if I save this, we're still just seeing the hello that's in the index.html because we haven't specified that we actually want this file to run. So to do that, we'll come over here. Let's get rid of the inline JavaScript, but we're going to keep the script tags. Now, to load this script.js file, we can just add a source attribute, much like you would do with an image tag. So let's just say script.js. It's in the same folder. You might have it in a JavaScript folder or JS folder like that, but ours is right there. So we'll go ahead and save. And now we're going to see this hello from JS file. Okay, so that JavaScript file is now being loaded. Very, very, very simple stuff. I know 90% of you probably already know this. But of course, I need to think of people of all skill levels. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is stop live server, and you can do that by hitting this button right here. You can also right click and say stop live server. And now if I reload this, it's not going to work anymore. Okay, so I'm going to close VS Code, and I'm just going to delete this my website folder. And then in the next video, we're going to start to learn about the console in the browser, which is extremely important. And we're going to start working on our JavaScript sandbox.